This time on One Foot Flipper, I'm going to teach you some easy way to sort through some hard categories like comic books, video games, and Dungeons and Dragons. Stay tuned.
One Foot Flipper.
Hi, Paige here, the One Foot Flipper, and today we're going to talk about some easy rules to pick through 8 rather complicated eBay categories when sourcing. These are 8 more collector, more nerdy categories that a lot of people might not know about, and they can take some real knowledge, but I'm going to go over some rather safe rules you can use when buying so you don't end up buying garbage. Now, these rules do not mean that there's value outside of these rules. There definitely is, so you don't need to go in the comments and put the 7,000 exceptions to these rules. These rules are so you can only end up buying good stuff in general. It's not a no man left behind situation at all. You will miss value using these rules, but what you're not going to do using these rules is generally bring home a bunch of junk, which is what you would otherwise do in most of these categories. Okay, the first one we're going to go over is comic books. What you need to realize is that most comic books are worthless. Period. They're not even valuable in bulk for the most part unless you have a very large amount of them, or very large or long runs of the same title. Especially if it's from the 90s or newer, forget about it. Just move on. And I know everybody's going to jump in and talk about the exceptions. We're not talking about that. We want safe buying so you can actually resell. And there are 2 indicators to go by for safe reselling. It's the cover price of the comic book and recognizable characters, and you basically want the best combination of it. Comic books started out with 10-cent cover prices in the 1930s, and they stayed 10-cent cover price till about 1960. Now, the amount of pages in the books from the 30s through the 50s got lower and lower over time, and that's how they maintained that cover price for that long. But for our purposes, that we're never buying a comic book with a cover price over 75 cents, and we're not buying many of those. In general, 10, 12, and 15-cent cover price comics are safe buys at garage sale prices, not $5 each. We're talking garage sale prices. Those will generally be safe buys. Once you start getting over 15 cents, you need to start looking for recognizable characters. You need to see Superman and Batman and Spider-Man, recognizable characters. And even with recognizable characters, you don't want to buy anything over a cover price of 75 cents. And even then, those recognizable characters, 75-cent cover prices, your buy value needs to be low, and you need to have large amounts of the same title, because most of those are still worthless and only sellable in bulk. But if you follow this in general, though, you should be able to go out there and look through those comics and see if that collection has any value in it or not. Most collections don't have value. Most comic book collections are 1990 and newer, with a smattering of 80s books and very little of real value. Okay, next thing we're going to look for, and this is Pokemon cards. This one drives me crazy, because I will see people on YouTube, some of our best friends, K-Ride Common Flips and Jimmy the Dolphin and people like that. They will go out to a garage sale and they will just see a box of Pokemon cards. And they know nothing about Pokemon cards. They have no idea how to spot valuable ones or not. And they will negotiate a price on this box of Pokemon cards that could literally, it's a mystery box. It could be worth 0. It's probably worth 0. And they'll buy these things and they'll negotiate heavily on the price, when in reality they're probably buying garbage. If you want to look for actual valuable Pokemon cards, here's what you're going to want to do. You're going to want to look for this first edition logo that I'm going to point out in this picture right here. And you're going to look for these couple of set symbols here. If you're not finding that stuff, you pass on the collection unless you're paying about a penny per card. Then at least you can sell them back off in bulk if there's not anything worthwhile. And there's usually nothing worthwhile. Most Pokemon collections that aren't of the earliest era have little to no value in them, particularly children's collections, because most children don't end up with any valuable cards. Because they either Any valuable cards they ended up with got trade sharked away by the one kid at school who actually knew the real card values, or a lot of their cards came from aftermarket products like repacks you can get at the grocery store or vending machines that never had cards of value in the first place. In general, in modern Pokemon sets, most of the value goes in a few cards in the sets, and the rest of them are nearly worthless. So, once again, look for that first edition symbol, or look for these couple of set symbols. If you don't see that, move on. Magic the Gathering cards. I don't see people go nuts on these in garage sale videos as much as they do for Pokemon. Not sure why. There's a whole lot more money in Magic cards than there are in Pokemon cards. The number one thing you're going to look for, knowing nothing about Magic, is the age of the collection. And the number one indication that a collection is going to be old is when you see a bunch of these white bordered cards. Now, white border cards are not the most valuable Magic cards in the world at all. In fact, white border indicates that the card is a reprint, but they only did the white border equals reprint thing in the 90s. They dropped it, so they only did it for the first 4 or 5 years of the game. So if you see a collection full of these white bordered cards, you know you've got an old collection, and that there's a very solid indication that you might have value there, and you can know that without knowing any individual cards. You can figure it. The rest of that you can figure out later, and you can also look for this gold symbol right here. Now, the first few sets didn't have the gold symbol to indicate the rare card, so that has no meaning on the first few sets. But after that, you got that gold symbol there that indicates a card is a rare. Doesn't necessarily indicate it's valuable, though. Many, many, many gold symbol cards have little to no value. If you'd like to see an example of some, just go to my onefootflipper card store, link below in the description, the second store, and you will find 10,000 gold symbol Magic cards with little to no value. All right, fourth, we're going to talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! And other collectible card game cards. Don't pay more than the value of the supplies that these collections come with. The binders, the deck boxes. Nobody other than an expert at these games can sort value out of these collections in any sort of time frame that makes sense. If you handed me 1,000 Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards, even me, who used to work in a card store that sold Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards, I could not pick through those cards in a fast enough time frame to where it wouldn't make more financial sense to throw them in the trash. So just skip out on Yu-Gi-Oh! And other collectible card games, period, unless they're basically free, or the bind, a good used binder is worth $3 or $4. If the whole binder's full and you only pay $3 or $4, yeah, buy it. Toss the whole binder up on eBay. Don't worry about what the contents are. Okay, your fifth category here, Dungeons and Dragons and other role-playing games. We're going to look at Dungeons and Dragons first. You're going to look for the edition. Most Dungeons and Dragons is sellable. You're only going to want to pass up things that say they're 4th edition and things that say they're 5th edition. 4th edition has no fan base. 5th edition is the current edition, but it's also the edition that's going to be soon phasing out for a new edition. You do not want to be buying something that everybody's about to dump. That's not what you want to do. Otherwise, you can safely buy almost everything else that says Dungeons and Dragons, with the exception of these 3 books here, which is specifically the basic 3rd edition 3 core rule books, the Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, and Monster Manual. These are called the 3.0 rulebooks. It doesn't say that on there. You don't want those because there was a 3.5th edition that overrode those books, and nobody uses the 3.0 rulebooks for those systems, so they have little to no value. Although, if you only paid $1, it's still fine too. If it's $1 a book, don't even worry about it. Other role-playing games are really not likely to show up at garage sales and general picking, but if they do, anything printed in the 90s or older, for most part, will hold value. There's going to be very few exceptions to that. Like, I've sold hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of RPG books, and I've only encountered a few books from the 90s that just weren't sellable, and even those were basically self-published. There wasn't a lot of self-published stuff in the 90s. The self-published stuff, like my Red Box Fantasy System, and there being 100 other companies making similar stuff, that took off after 3rd edition D&D in the 2000s. So 1990s and earlier is safe for RPGs that are Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, your 6th category here. Warhammer, which includes Warhammer 40,000, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, Blood Bowl, and half a dozen other games put out by Games Workshop and Citadel Miniatures. What you're looking for here are metal miniatures and big vehicles. Those are the gold standards for value, as are rulebooks. Anything still in the box, the older looking the box is, the better. Even empty boxes can sell by themselves if they're the old ones. Now, when it comes to the smaller plastic miniatures and you don't even know what they are, don't pay more than $1 each in bulk, because you're probably not going to get more than $1 to $2 each in bulk for them, and you're going to have to waste some time to figure out what they are. But there's nothing really bad in this category, so if you're getting it for super good prices, then you can buy all of it. There's nothing that you need to skip. Okay, number 7. See me sell a lot of these. Board games. Now, when it comes to board games, your eternal popular games like Monopoly, they are worthless. You don't want to buy Monopoly. You don't want to buy, anything that's been out continually since the 50s, 60s, 40s, 70s, 80s. Forget about it. Trivia games, worthless. Throw them in the trash. General family, word, puzzle, and math games are worthless. Cranium, nope. Leave it there. Really, the only exception in that little category is Scrabble. If you get a really deluxe Scrabble set, like the the all-wood set with the rotating turntable, that's got some money. But the rest of the general adult and family board games are worthless. What you want to look for is licenses, like TV shows. If you find an A-Team board game, buy it. If you find a Legend of Zelda board game, buy it. You find a board game with a fantasy theme, buy it. And things like that, those are the things that sell. Also, in general, I would avoid toddler games. Games aimed at children 5 and under are not nearly as valuable as games targeted age 7 to 14. So those are the games you want to look for. In general, skip toddler games, not a lot of value there. And then bookshelf games like these Avalon Hill games, these are 100% sellable, but the value varies all over the place on them, from $10 at the low end to several $100s, depending on which title you've got. So if you're only buying 1 or 2 games there, you might want to look them up. If, there's a whole wall of the things, you can just safely buy them in bulk. There'll be good ones in with the bad. Okay, and 8th one, we'll talk about video games. But wait, Paige, video games are great. Everybody buys and sells video games. It's the best category on eBay. No, not really. Video games have devolved over time to the point where most video games are now trash. We're going to talk about, however, what are your safe buys for video games. Now, I know you'll want to tell me all the exceptions in the comments. I'm not worried about the exceptions. I'm only worried about you not bringing home things that you can't sell. If you left something at that garage sale that you could have sold, oh well. You missed it. Maybe the next guy got it. Let him have it. Maybe he deserved it. Here's what you can safely buy. In general, you're not going to buy a sports game at all, ever, unless it's a gimmick title. Gimmick titles are things like NBA Jam or Base Wars, where in Base Wars robots are playing baseball. But if it's a straight up sports title, you will ignore it 100% of the time. It doesn't matter that there's a few exceptions out there. Learning the exceptions is not worthwhile. If you were a video game specialist, you wouldn't be listening to this anyway. This is just the safe stuff to buy. So non-sports cartridges for the Nintendo, the Super Nintendo, the original Game Boy, the Sega Master System, the Sega Genesis, and the Nintendo 64. You can, at garage sale prices, you can buy those cartridges safely without worrying that you're going to bring home junk that you can't sell. Now, older cartridge systems like Atari, Coleco, and other pre-Nintendo systems, I would generally avoid these cartridges unless they are nearly free or they are boxed, because these systems do not, for the most part, have the demand equal to the amount of the stuff that's out there. So you can end up with lots and lots of games that are really only worth money in big lots. Moving on to that next generation here, you can safely buy non-sports titles for Sega CD, Sega Saturn, Sega Dreamcast. Everything other than sports games for those systems are generally safe. on newer Nintendo systems past the Nintendo 64, on the various disc-based systems, Wii and such, Game Boy Color and the other later handhelds, only buy Nintendo exclusive titles like Mario, Zelda, and Metroid. And you can also add in Wii Sports and Pokemon titles to the safe list. And skip the rest unless it's dirt cheap. On your Sony and your Xbox consoles, the only generally safe rule is that anime games tend to be sellable. Otherwise, the most popular titles for these systems are, for the most part, worthless, and they continue to lose value over time. And I think that is just about covered just about every system you're going to encounter in the wild. I'm only talking about the games themselves, not the systems. Whether or not you want to deal with the systems is up to you. I am hating dealing with the systems more and more as time goes on, and it might get to the point where I'm not taking that system unless it's in the box or it's free, because just the number of returns and problems just gets bigger and bigger every year with these things. All right, hey, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, hey, make sure you're still subscribed. I am almost at my 3-year subscriber goal. I am so close as the making of this video. So just do it for me. Do it for a one-legged guy who has to sit here and make videos and make him $2.12 an hour. Do it for me. Hey, hope to see you again soon. Bye.